Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. We're going to take a look at that big Epstein press conference yesterday with Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. We want to hear from the survivors, and Ro Khanna is going to join us. Is he coming in studio? I believe so.
I don't know. Yeah.
I think he'll be
Producers can tell us.
Either here or remotely.
Yeah.
In any case, we'll have Ro Khanna to break all of that down. We're also taking a look at this giant Chinese military parade, what it says about the state of the world and our own military, where it stands in the pecking order at this point. We've got some new signs of economic turmoil, including some very revealing comments from the CEO of McDonald's. New York Times reporting that the Trump administration, Trump himself, is trying to intervene directly in the New York City mayoral race to try to clear the field for Andrew Cuomo. Very interesting what's happening there. Juan David Rojas is going to join us to break down whether or not we are prepping to invade Venezuela. So you definitely want to stick around for that. And I'm taking a look at Tim Dillon's defense of his appearance at a Saudi comedy festival. I don't know if you guys have been following this. It's not just Tim Dillon, by the way.
Yeah.
Basically every comedian you've ever heard of is going to the Saudi comedy festival, part of their whole like whitewashing of their image through cultural and sporting events. So there's a lot to dig into there.
Yes, that's right. I'm excited to listen because Tim was honest about it, and I think your monologue is what it tells us, which is important.
Yes, that's right.
Before we get to that, thank you to everybody who has been signing up, breakingpoints.com, to become a premium subscriber. Obviously, we did get the AMA off without a hitch, I might say. We actually got it done. And of course, we have our Friday show.
It only took us like a month to figure it out.
It only took a couple of weeks, but we did certainly do it. Now, here's the thing. You know, we have the Friday show. We have all the benefits and more, but you are supporting our work, our ability to get the congressman, you know, here in studio and so much more behind the scenes with the team. So thank you to everybody who is able to do that, breakingpoints.com. Again, if you can't afford it, no worries. Just please go ahead and hit subscribe on this YouTube video to our channel. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, just please rate us 5 stars and send the show to a friend. It's the most helpful thing that you could possibly do for us. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the Epstein press conference. Congressman Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie introducing a discharge petition in the House of Representatives to force the government to release all of the Epstein files. They were joined by 10 Epstein survivors who were there at the press conference, who spoke quite poignantly about the current cover-up by the government. Let's take a listen.
And let me announce now, several of us Epstein survivors have been discussing creating our own list of names. Yes. We know the names. Many of us were abused by them. Now, together as survivors, we will confidentially compile the names we all know were regularly in the Epstein world. And it will be done by survivors and for survivors.
Jeffrey and Ghislaine were always very boastful about their friends, their famous or powerful friends. And his biggest brag forever was that he was very good friends with Donald Trump. He had an 8x10 framed picture of him on his desk with the two of them. Like, they were very close.
So that was some of the, they're going to release their own list. Obviously, some of the MAGA people are upset that Trump was named there. Trump's defense and many of the others, he's just one of many. Very true, which is why you should just release all of it, isn't it? That's really what it all comes down to.
Is it?
Yeah, but it's like, oh yeah, but it didn't have to all be a story about you, but you're the person who created it. You whipped people up and got people interested in the story, promised transparency, took it away. And now it looks like, you know, because at least the appearance of, by your own behavior, is that it is largely because that you yourself were present. Easy way to get around it is just to release everything. Here actually was an interesting moment on MSNBC where they were asked specifically about Trump and in particular what they knew about that. Let's take a listen.
So can I get a show of hands? Who here is satisfied with the level of contact they've had from Congress? Nobody. Let me ask this. How about the Justice Department? I want to ask a couple of things about what you knew about things that were happening with this case that you're obviously involved with. Show of hands. Did any of you hear from the Justice Department before they released that memo, that 2-page memo earlier this summer? No hands. Were any of you told that Todd Blanche would be speaking with Ghislaine Maxwell prior to that interview over the course of 2 days?
No.
No. Were any of you told about the prison transfer that Ghislaine Maxwell?
No.
Do any of you feel that the DOJ has communicated with you enough this year?
No.
Have any of you had any communication with the DOJ?
No.
Nobody in this room has heard at all from the Department of Justice?
No.
Is that surprising to you?
No.
No.
No, the reason I think that's important is this traces back to the original sin, within all of this, the non-prosecution agreement that was agreed to with Epstein in 2007, which violated all of their rights because they were not informed of the sweetheart deal that he got, which enabled him not only to continue a lot of his behavior, again, by the admission of the DOJ and others, a lot of the testimony, including people who've spoken out previously, but it does go to show you how they have been sidelined really in all of this. And I do think it's important, not to only forget all of them, but then particularly what all of this stacks upon each other for. We have a system, again, where legally they were required to be informed of all of that. And then they were like, oh, that's the reason that it got voided back in 2018. And a lot of these stuff was even allowed to come to light. And since that period, again, they've just been kind of shuttled about as pawns within this bigger story. And this is part of what is so, I think horrible about it. It's not about Trump, or well, maybe it is. It's not about one particular person. It's about them. It's about the treatment that they suffered. And then it's about a system of extremely powerful people, both sides, business, et cetera, that came together and it seemingly, used their power, influence, et cetera, in order to cover up a lot of what was going on there in a way that no reasonable person would have ever expected to be treated if they did not have all of these sorts of connections. Those connections themselves remain, I believe, the central part of the entire story. So.
Yeah, you're so right to talk about the original sin there, because we were just talking before the show about, the Palm Beach PD originally.
Yeah.
Once they get the first tip about this, they're pursuing this like they would any criminal case. And obviously they're well aware that Jeffrey Epstein is an incredibly wealthy, well-connected individual, but they're tracking down the leads. They're talking to these girls, they're talking to their families, they're compiling a case file. And then the whole thing basically gets quashed, swept up in the sweetheart deal. So let's say that you are you think that there's nothing more to see here than basically one evil guy and Ghislaine Maxwell facilitating, doing these horrific things, and there's no larger conspiracy, there's no larger cover-up. We also deserve to know if rich and powerful people can just get away with things just because they have that kind of money. Like, that would also be an important piece of information to have. The reason, there's obviously a lot of reasons why we're suspicious that there are other things going on due to the power and connections that he had. We just had emails released between him and, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who's very enmeshed in the Israeli security defense industrial complex. So there are many other questions there as well. But even just to know, oh, this is how it goes for you if you're rich and powerful. Okay, thank you. It's good to understand that about what is going on in America. In terms, I'm curious, Saagar, for your view on how this has played out politically and whether or not this has ended up being a significant story for Trump, because certainly it seems like with the MAGA base, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie being there. First, Thomas Massie is now like persona non grata with MAGA, certainly with Trump. He's working hard to try to primary Thomas Massie and get him removed from office, et cetera. But it sure seems like most of the MAGA base has moved on, that they've more or less bought his idea that this is a Democrat hoax, that there's nothing to see here, and all of these people only care about it because it has to do with Donald Trump, and they have sort of moved on from it. I still continue to think, though, that it's an important story not only because of the substance of it, but from the political perspective. Trump really positioned himself as this warrior against the deep state, right, who was going to fight on your behalf, who was going to reveal the truth, expose the secrets, et cetera. And that image, the Epstein story, was a dagger in the heart of that particular image. And that was a big part of his appeal with, I'm going to talk about Tim Dillon in my monologue today, with that circle of people who felt like this was like a renegade who was going to come in and blow up the system.
Trump's greatest strength is that he was a blank slate from which you could project anything that you wanted. You could be anti-war and you could project it. If you could be pro-war, you could project pro-Israel and anti-Israel, right? These were disparate forces. Epstein, I could go on for Maha, all of that was a project which he could subsume, he could wink, he could nod. He was pro-IVF and he was pro-life. Now, if you're following the policy and all of that, some of that would start to fall apart. But in reality, that's not how most people vote. They look at it, and unfortunately, one of the things about Americans is that they actually take a lot of the words that politicians say seriously, if you look at it. And so for the Epstein thing, it's like you just said, MAGA base is about 25 to 30% of the American public, maybe actually less at this point. That's 70%. Now, Trump won the popular vote, which means, you know, at least some 51% of the people who voted in the election, at maybe half of the people who voted for Trump then are not so-called MAGA. So those people matter a lot. That's why I've talked about Israel in the context of Michigan. Are all of the people who voted for Trump in Michigan because of Israel? Absolutely not. Was it enough of a margin to get him over there? Absolutely yes. Now, the Epstein one, I don't think anybody really voted on Epstein per se, but we live in an anti-institutional, anti-elite moment. The Epstein story resonates deeply. And by the way, you know, if I'm in public or anything, what's the number one thing I get asked about? Epstein. Number one. Number one. Now, I mean, a lot of that is because of the work that I do, and that's maybe it's a little bit self-selecting, but that's also usually my gauge. I'm like, this stuff still hits. Like, it really does to a lot of people. And I think the reason, again, is that if you're not willing to engage and or tell the truth about what's happening with this, then what else are you covering up? It's like a side issue. It's kind of like one of those symbological, like, areas for politics where if you can't tell me here, then this whole apparatus just seems
the whole
very
facade crumbles.
Yeah, bingo. And that's why I've always thought that the story is very deeply important. It became kind of MAGA coded because it was anti-establishment, but now you're the government, you are the establishment, and so you know it kind of flips that on its head. Trump, by the way, not helping himself all that much in the way that he talks about all of this in terms of making it look like a cover-up. He continues to call it the quote Democratic Epstein hoax. Let's take a listen. He was asked about this in the Oval Office.
Is the Justice Department protecting any friends or donors, sir?
So this is a Democrat hoax that never ends. From what I understand, I could check, but from what I understand, thousands of pages of documents have been given. But it's really a Democrat hoax because they're trying to get people to talk about something that's totally irrelevant.
Today he called it a hoax while these women were speaking out and they were saying, we're not a hoax. We're human beings. Yeah. It's not a hoax because Jeffrey Epstein is a convicted pedophile. That takes away the whole hoax things. It's not a hoax. It's not a lie. And on that note, Eric, every Republican should be able to sign on to this. And that's the real hoax, that they're afraid to sign on to it because somebody who, you know, who is a real coward from one of the Trump admin officials came out and called this a hostile act against the Trump administration. The hostile act was Jeffrey Epstein raping 14-year-old girls. That was the hostile act, and it's not a hoax.
Oh, good for her.
Preach,
props to Marjorie for being able to speak out about this. We have Congressman Ro Khanna standing by. He's going to break down some of the latest on his discharge petition. Let's get to it. Joining us now is Congressman Ro Khanna. He's been a leader on the release of the Epstein files, including a press conference we just showed everybody yesterday. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me back.
So you had that press conference yesterday. We were saying a little bit before, it was very emotional. There were some calls from many of these Epstein victims, not only for a release of the files, but also for potentially compiling their own quote-unquote list. At the same time, you've been working with Congressman Thomas Massie for a discharge petition. Guys, we can put A5 up here on the screen. So Congressman, can you give us any update on the amount of signatures, and particularly Republican signatures, you will need in order to get to this to the floor and potentially for a vote and for a release of the Epstein files?
Well, first of all, I just hope everyone takes the time to watch the survivors. I felt just overwhelmed with disgust hearing them. They were in tears. They were talking about being in junior high or in 9th grade and being raped. And they were talking about having to recruit other junior high and high school friends to come to Epstein's house to be raped. Oh. It was horrifying. And I so admire their courage. I don't understand how every person is not supporting what they want, which is the release of these files. And this is something that has gone on well before Donald Trump. They've been asking for this for years. They're finally being heard. We have a situation where we're going to get all 212 House Democrats. There's one of our members who lost his mother, unfortunately, and so he's going to come in the next few days. He will sign, and one other member signing today. We'll have 212. We have 4 Republicans, and so we need 2 more signatures. Thomas Massie and I are in conversation with about 10 potential people who are open to signing. I'm very confident by the end of this month, we are going to get to the 218 number, and then we have 7 days, and then we will have a vote. on the bill.
The president has reportedly been pushing very hard to keep Republicans from signing your discharge petition. What is your awareness of those efforts, and how hard are they whipping against this?
It's as hard as I've seen them whip against anything. I mean, the president, from my understanding, is reaching out to individual members. We had 12, remember, co-sponsors on our bill. And Thomas Massie and I say we probably shouldn't have gotten the co-sponsors. It was giving a roadmap to the White House on who to target. And that's why we're being a little bit more vague about how we're going to get to 218. But we're very confident we will get there. But look, Thomas Massie has millions of dollars being spent against him from the White House, from the billionaires, some who may be implicated in the Epstein files, from AIPAC. I mean, he's a profile in Courage. And other members that see that and they say, well, we don't want millions of dollars spent against us. So it really takes some guts to sign. But now with Marjorie Taylor Greene, with Nancy Mace, and with Lauren Boebert signing, and after hearing those survivors, I really do think some other Republicans are going to do the right thing. I mean, it was just so emotional yesterday.
Has AIPAC, sorry, just to pick up on what you just said, I know Thomas Massie, AIPAC is unhappy with him for other reasons. Have they taken an interest in the Epstein file release as well, to your knowledge?
No, I should make that clear. They're going after him because he talks about human rights in Palestine. I mean, with me, they just tweet against me, but with him, they actually are pouring in millions of dollars to try to defeat him.
Congressman, one of the things that happened earlier this week is that the House Oversight Committee released a bunch of, quote, Epstein files. I spent hours, unfortunately, going through a lot of it. It turned out that almost 99% of it, I believe, from your commentary was already public, so wasted several hours of my life. But that seemed to be a cover for some Republicans to not vote for your petition, despite the fact that, again, the vast majority that's been so-called released was already publicly available. Is that how you saw that stunt by the Oversight Committee?
Yes. Look, if you're not following this closely and someone says, well, 33,000 documents were released, the average person says, well, what more do they want? Well, that's less than 1% of all the files. The parts that were released were already public, and they're not releasing the key things, which are the witness interviews with other men who tried to cover up for Epstein, with other men who were part of this farm system and abused young girls. They're not releasing the financial records. They're not releasing the CIA or FBI investigations. They're not releasing what the survivors are telling us should be released. And people often say, well, how do we know that they're going to release something accurately? Well, the survivors' lawyers have seen these files. They know that there's explosive information in these files. So they will be able to corroborate when there is a release that the information has been released. And this is what the survivors want, for closure and for justice.
I think that's a really important point. What did you make? The other thing they did is they released the audio and the transcript of that Todd Blanche interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. What did you make of that?
Well, it was embarrassing that Maxwell is lavishing praise on Donald Trump to try to get a pardon. And it actually really upset and angered some of the survivors. In fact, the purpose of the press conference for many of the survivors was to talk about the Epstein files and the release of that. But some of them were so outraged by Maxwell's abuse and how Maxwell is being treated that they wanted to speak about that and did speak about that. I mean, they were raped because of Maxwell as girls. And now they're hearing Maxwell be treated as some kind of victim or trying to get some kind of pardon. I don't think we fully understand when the president calls this a hoax, when they're talking about pardoning Maxwell, the impact that has on hundreds of survivors across the country.
Congressman, another thing I wanted to make sure that I specified with you is I saw that there was potential for the CIA and others to actually redact or not include, even with your legislation, some of the potential ties and or scrutiny on intelligence. So what, safeguards have you built in and pressure can you ensure that even if such a release does happen, that it is not covered up, let's say for 60 years, a la what's happening with the JFK files?
Well, it's going to be a fight for disclosure. And I'm not saying that our bill is the panacea and it's going to solve everything, but it's going to get us a lot of the information, particularly where the financial support for Epstein was coming from, who the other powerful, rich men were engaged in the cover-up, were engaged in the sex trafficking. Are we going to be able to fully understand if there were foreign ties and who they were? That's going to be a fight. I mean, obviously, there's always, they will claim national security privilege. We will push for as much as can be released. But the first step is to get the law passed to call for the release of the file.
Congressman, I've heard a lot of Democrats, they're signing on to the discharge petition, so we want to give them credit for that. But I've heard them describe this issue as a quote unquote distraction. How do you see it?
No one is saying that after yesterday. I mean, you can't say that it's a distraction. I mean, there were human beings who were raped as girls, and if a nation is going to allow rich and powerful men to assault and traffic young girls without any consequence, then it's a nation that has lost its moral bearings. I mean, I think this is the most fundamental issue. And you know what? It's an issue that possibly could bring us together. Are we still capable of coming together as a country on anything? Like, can't we come together as a nation and say underage girls should be protected, our kids should be protected? We should stand with survivors who are crying in front of the country telling us that they were raped as girls. You know, Marjorie Taylor Greene was so emotional afterwards. She gave me a hug. I mean, this was not politics. It really was not. It was, anyone who was there would realize that this was the most basic human issue. And I really think that's how people should look at it. We've gotten too inured being in Congress thinking, oh, what's going to have a polling advantage or a political advantage? This is something just basic justice.
Yeah. Congressman, we really appreciate the work that you are doing, and please keep us updated on this petition, and we're really hoping that it can go through. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us.
Thank you. Thank you for covering it.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.